The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at her bedroom window watching the groundskeepers tend to the immaculate gardens below. Her reflection in the glass revealed dark circles under her eyes, evidence of another sleepless night filled with difficult decisions. The weight of recent events had taken its toll, and today would mark a turning point that would send shockwaves through the British royal family. William paced restlessly in his study, his usual composure cracking under the pressure of circumstances beyond his control. The future King of England, known for his steady demeanor and unwavering dedication to duty, found himself facing a crisis that threatened to tear apart everything he held dear. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from palace officials, each more urgent than the last, but he couldn't bring himself to answer them. The troubles had begun months earlier when a series of disagreements between Catherine and other senior royals had escalated beyond private conversations. What started as differences of opinion about charitable initiatives had evolved into fundamental disagreements about the direction of the monarchy. Catherine's modern approach to royal duties often clashed with traditional expectations, creating tension that reverberated through the ancient halls of the palace. Queen Camilla, who had worked tirelessly to establish her position within the royal hierarchy, watched these developments with keen interest. Her relationship with Catherine had always been cordial but distant, marked by polite exchanges and careful diplomacy. However, beneath the surface of royal protocol, there existed an undercurrent of competition for influence and position within the family structure. The breaking point came during a private family dinner at Clarence's house 3 weeks prior. What should have been a routine gathering to discuss upcoming royal engagements turned into a heated exchange when Catherine voiced her concerns about certain palace policies. Her passionate advocacy for mental health awareness and her desire to modernize royal traditions had always been welcomed publicly, but privately, some viewed her suggestions as overstepping boundaries. William found himself caught between supporting his wife's vision and maintaining family harmony. The pressure of mediating between Catherine's progressive ideas and the establishment's resistance began to weigh heavily on him. Late-night conversations between the couple grew tense as they struggled to find common ground while remaining united as a team. The palace staff noticed the growing strain. Longtime employees whispered in corridors about missed meetings and canceled engagements. Catherine's usually warm interactions with staff became more formal and distant. She spent increasing amounts of time alone, often walking the gardens or sitting in the palace library, surrounded by books but seemingly lost in thought. King Charles, dealing with his own challenges as the newly crowned monarch, tried to mediate the situation. His attempts at family meetings and private conversations with both William and Catherine yielded little progress. The generational divide between traditional royal expectations and modern approaches to monarchy created a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Media speculation began to swirl as royal watchers noticed Catherine's reduced public appearances. Carefully crafted statements from Kensington Palace cited scheduling conflicts and personal commitments, but astute observers detected something deeper. The usually coordinated royal calendar showed gaps where Catherine's name should have appeared alongside William's for joint engagements. Behind closed doors, Catherine made the agonizing decision that would change everything. After weeks of soul-searching and difficult conversations with trusted advisors, she concluded that stepping away temporarily might be the only way to preserve both her integrity and her marriage. The decision wasn't made lightly. It came after exhausting all other options and realizing that the current situation was unsustainable. The night before her departure, Catherine sat in her private sitting room, writing letters to her children. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were too young to fully understand the complexities of royal life. But she wanted them to know that her decision came from love, not abandonment. Each word was carefully chosen, explaining that sometimes people need time apart to figure things out, just like when they needed quiet time to solve difficult puzzles. William discovered her plans just hours before she intended to leave. The confrontation in their private quarters was emotional and heart-wrenching. Years of partnership, shared dreams, and mutual support seemed to hang in the balance as they faced the possibility of separation. William's shock quickly turned to desperation as he pleaded with Catherine to reconsider, but her mind was made up. The logistics of Catherine's departure required careful orchestration. Palace security coordinated with trusted staff to ensure privacy and discretion. A small convoy of vehicles was arranged to transport Catherine to a private residence away from London, where she could have the space and time she needed to reflect on her future role within the royal family. As dawn broke on the day of departure, Catherine took one last walk through the palace gardens she had grown to love. The rose garden, where she had often found solace during difficult times, seemed to bid her farewell as morning dew clung to the petals. She paused at the bench where she and William had often sat together, planning their future and discussing their dreams for their children and their country. The actual moment of leaving proved even more difficult than anticipated. Catherine's composure, maintained throughout the planning process, finally cracked as she embraced William one last time. The man who would one day be king stood helpless as the woman he loved walked away, uncertain when or if she would return to the life they had built together. Palace staff who witnessed the departure spoke later of the profound sadness that seemed to envelop the usually bustling residence. The absence of Catherine's presence was immediately felt, not just by her family, but by everyone who had grown accustomed to her warm greetings and genuine interest in their lives. News of Catherine's departure spread quickly through the inner circles of the royal household, even as official channels maintained strict silence. The carefully managed image of royal stability suddenly seemed fragile as those closest to the family grappled with the implications of her absence. William's immediate response was to throw himself into his official duties, attending scheduled engagements and maintaining public appearances as if nothing had changed. However, those who knew him well could see the toll the separation was taking. His usual ease with crowds seemed forced, and his smiles appeared strained during what should have been routine interactions. The children's routines were maintained as much as possible, with nannies and staff working to provide stability during an uncertain time. However, young Prince George's occasional questions about his mother's whereabouts created heartbreaking moments for William, who struggled to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms while dealing with his own emotional turmoil. Queen Camilla's reaction to these developments would soon become a source of controversy that would ripple through the palace and beyond. Her position as the new queen consort had been carefully established through years of gradual acceptance, but Catherine's departure presented both challenges and opportunities that would test her political instincts and personal character. As the first day without Catherine drew to a close, William stood once again at the window of his study, looking out at the same gardens his wife had gazed upon that morning. The future of the monarchy, his marriage, and his family hung in the balance as he faced the most challenging period of his life. Little did he know that the events about to unfold would test not only his personal resilience, but also the very foundations of the royal family's public image. The morning after Catherine's departure brought an eerie quiet to Kensington Palace. William awoke to an empty bed and the harsh reality that his wife's absence wasn't just a nightmare. The familiar sounds of the palace morning routine continued around him, but everything felt hollow and strange. Staff members moved through their duties with unusual solemnity, their usual cheerful greetings replaced by sympathetic nods and concerned glances. King Charles arrived at the palace earlier than usual, his face grave with worry about his son and the implications for the monarchy. The private meeting between father and son in William's study lasted over 2 hours, with raised voices occasionally heard through the thick oak doors. Charles understood the delicate balance required to maintain family unity while preserving the institution they all served, but William's emotional state made rational discussion nearly impossible. During their conversation, William broke down completely for the first time since Catherine's departure. The composed prince who had faced military service, public scrutiny, and royal responsibilities with unwavering strength finally crumbled under the weight of personal loss. Charles, despite his own struggles with family relationships over the years, found himself at a loss for words that could comfort his eldest son. The king's primary concern extended beyond family dynamics to the potential public relations disaster that Catherine's absence could create. The royal family's approval ratings had steadily improved under William and Catherine's popular partnership, and any suggestion of marital problems could undermine public confidence in the monarchy's stability. Palace communications teams worked frantically to develop strategies for managing potential media inquiries. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Queen Camilla hosted her weekly tea with several prominent society ladies, a gathering that had become an important part of her role as queen consort. Lady Pemberton, the Duchess of Marlborough, and Mrs. Harrison Wells, wife of a prominent conservative MP, joined Camilla in her elegantly appointed drawing room, unaware that their hostess was about to make comments that would create a scandal. The conversation initially focused on upcoming charitable galas and social events, but inevitably turned to the notable absence of Catherine from recent engagements. When Lady Pemberton expressed concern about the Princess of Wales's well-being, Camilla's response revealed a side of her personality that few had seen publicly. "Perhaps some people aren't quite ready for the responsibilities that come with our positions," Camilla remarked, stirring her tea with deliberate precision. "Not everyone is cut out for a life of service and duty, regardless of how much preparation they receive." The comment might have remained within the confines of the private gathering, if not for what happened next. As the ladies discussed Catherine's departure in hushed tones, expressing sympathy for William's difficult situation, Camilla's facial expression shifted in a way that would soon become the subject of intense scrutiny. Mrs. Harrison Wells later described the moment to her husband. "There was something unsettling about her smile, not pleased exactly, but satisfied in a way that made me quite uncomfortable." The smirk that crossed Camilla's face as she set down her teacup suggested a level of satisfaction with Catherine's departure that shocked her guests. Lady Pemberton, a longtime friend of the royal family, immediately recognized the inappropriate nature of Camilla's reaction. Her discomfort was evident as she attempted to redirect the conversation toward more suitable topics, but the damage had already been done. The queen consort's apparent pleasure at Catherine's absence created an atmosphere of tension that lingered long after the tea service ended. Unknown to Camilla, one of the household staff members overheard portions of the conversation while serving refreshments. Sarah Mitchell, a loyal palace employee who had served the royal family for over 15 years, was deeply disturbed by what she witnessed. Her affection for Catherine, who had always treated staff with genuine kindness and respect, made Camilla's comments particularly painful to hear. Sarah struggled with the ethical dilemma of her situation. Palace protocol strictly forbade staff from discussing royal family matters outside their workplace, but her conscience troubled her deeply. That evening, she confided in her husband about what she had witnessed, describing Camilla's smirk and the cold satisfaction in her voice when discussing Catherine's difficulties. The next day brought additional challenges as William attempted to maintain his public schedule while processing his personal crisis. A visit to a children's hospital in London, planned weeks in advance, became an emotional ordeal as young patients asked about Catherine's whereabouts. William's usual ease with children was strained as he struggled to answer their innocent questions without revealing the truth about his family's situation. During the hospital visit, William's distress became more apparent to observant members of the press. Royal correspondent Patricia Williams noted his unusually subdued demeanor and the way his hands trembled slightly during a presentation to the hospital board. The future king's vulnerability was becoming increasingly difficult to hide behind the polished facade of royal duty. Back at the palace, staff members began to notice subtle but significant changes in the household dynamics. Without Catherine's moderating presence, tensions that had previously been kept in check began to surface. Camilla's increased involvement in palace affairs, ostensibly to help during Catherine's absence, was met with resistance from staff members loyal to the Princess of Wales. The head of household, Mr. Thornberry, faced the delicate task of managing these competing loyalties while maintaining operational efficiency. His 30-year career in royal service had taught him to navigate complex family dynamics, but the current situation presented unprecedented challenges. Staff members whispered in corridors about their concerns for William's well-being and their hopes for Catherine's eventual return. 3 days after the infamous tea party, the story began to leak beyond the palace walls. Mrs. Harrison Wells, unable to contain her shock at Camilla's behavior, mentioned the incident to her sister during a private dinner. Her sister, married to a prominent journalist, immediately recognized the significance of the information and faced her own moral dilemma about whether to pursue the story. The journalist, David Hartwell, had built his career on respectful royal coverage and had no desire to damage the monarchy unnecessarily. However, the implications of a queen consort showing satisfaction at a popular royal's departure were too significant to ignore. He began making discreet inquiries within palace circles, seeking confirmation of the story without revealing his sources. Meanwhile, William's emotional state continued to deteriorate as each day passed without word from Catherine. Their children's questions became more frequent and more difficult to answer. Prince George, particularly perceptive for his age, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, despite his parents' attempts to shield him from adult concerns. The prince's private secretary, James Morrison, watched with growing concern as William's usual decisiveness gave way to distraction and emotional volatility. Important decisions were delayed, meetings were cut short, and the efficient operation of the prince's office began to suffer under the weight of his personal crisis. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the royal family's trusted physician and confidant, was quietly summoned to assess William's condition. Her examination revealed signs of severe stress and emotional exhaustion that concerned her greatly. She recommended immediate counseling and a reduced public schedule, but William rejected both suggestions, insisting that his duty to the crown must continue uninterrupted. The breaking point came during a private family dinner at Windsor Castle. King Charles had arranged the gathering, hoping to provide William with family support and discuss practical arrangements for managing Catherine's absence. However, the evening took an unexpected turn when Camilla made comments that revealed the extent of her satisfaction with the current situation. "Perhaps this gives us an opportunity to restructure things more appropriately," Camilla suggested while discussing upcoming royal engagements. Some roles were perhaps expanded beyond what was traditionally intended. William's reaction was immediate and explosive. Years of suppressed frustration with Camilla's gradual assumption of influence within the family erupted in a confrontation that shocked everyone present. The future king, normally diplomatic and controlled, accused his stepmother of undermining his wife and taking pleasure in their family's crisis. "You never respected Catherine's position," William shouted, his voice breaking with emotion. "And now you're actually happy she's gone. How dare you smile about my family falling apart?" The accusation hung in the air as Charles tried to mediate between his son and wife. Camilla's immediate denial seemed hollow in light of her previous comments and behavior. The dinner ended abruptly with William storming out, leaving behind a family more divided than ever. Palace staff who witnessed the confrontation were sworn to absolute secrecy, but the emotional intensity of the scene left everyone shaken. The facade of royal unity was crumbling, and the implications for the monarchy's public image became increasingly serious. That night, William made a decision that would change everything. Unable to sleep and tormented by his isolation, he picked up his phone and composed a message to Catherine. The text was simple but desperate. "Please come home. I can't do this without you. The children need you. I need you." As dawn broke over London, the royal family faced its greatest crisis in years. Catherine's response to William's plea would determine not only the future of their marriage, but also the stability of the monarchy itself. The stage was set for a dramatic conclusion that would test the limits of duty, love, and family loyalty within the most scrutinized family in the world. Catherine's response to William's desperate message came not in words, but in silence that stretched through the morning hours. At her temporary residence in the Cotswolds, she sat in a sun-drenched conservatory, reading and rereading his text, while wrestling with emotions that threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained resolve. The beautiful countryside retreat, borrowed from close friends who understood her need for privacy, had provided the peace she desperately needed, but it couldn't heal the wounds that had driven her from her family. The story of Camilla's inappropriate behavior finally broke when David Hartwell published a carefully crafted article in The Telegraph. His piece, titled "Palace Sources Reveal Tensions Following Princess's Absence," detailed the Queen Consort's comments and her visible satisfaction during the private tea gathering. While he protected his sources meticulously, the article's impact was immediate and devastating for royal public relations. Within hours, social media exploded with outrage directed at Camilla. The hashtag #RespectCatherine began trending worldwide as supporters of the Princess of Wales expressed their shock and disappointment. Royal watchers who had followed Catherine's journey from commoner to beloved royal felt personally betrayed by Camilla's apparent lack of compassion for the younger woman's struggles. Palace Communications Director Sir Jeremy Walsh found himself managing the worst royal public relations crisis in recent memory. Emergency meetings were called as senior advisors scrambled to develop a response strategy. The traditional approach of never complain, never explain seemed inadequate when faced with such specific and damaging allegations about the Queen Consort's behavior. King Charles, already struggling to establish his reign's authority and direction, was forced to confront the reality that his wife had potentially damaged the monarchy's reputation at a critical moment. Private conversations between the king and queen became increasingly heated as Charles demanded explanations for behavior that seemed to contradict everything they had worked to achieve. Camilla's defense was weak and contradictory. She initially denied making inappropriate comments, then claimed her words had been misunderstood, and finally suggested that palace staff had exaggerated normal conversation. Her shifting explanations only fueled more speculation and criticism from a public that had already been skeptical of her elevation to Queen Consort. The most damaging evidence came when Sarah Mitchell, the longtime palace employee, decided to speak publicly about what she had witnessed. Her interview with BBC's royal correspondent provided detailed first-hand testimony about Camilla's smirk and satisfied demeanor when discussing Catherine's departure. Sarah's 15 years of unblemished service and obvious reluctance to speak against the royal family gave her account tremendous credibility. "I've served this family with pride for many years," Sarah told the BBC. "But I couldn't stay silent when I saw Her Majesty showing what appeared to be pleasure at Princess Catherine's pain. The princess has always been kind to all of us, and she deserved better than that reaction to her struggles." William's reaction to the public revelation of Camilla's behavior was volcanic. Already emotionally fragile from Catherine's absence, the confirmation that his stepmother had indeed taken satisfaction from his family's crisis pushed him beyond his breaking point. A hastily arranged meeting between William and his father deteriorated into the worst argument of their relationship. "She's been undermining Catherine from the beginning," William accused. his voice raw with emotion and exhaustion. "And now the whole world can see what kind of person you've chosen to put on the throne beside you." Charles found himself torn between defending his wife and supporting his son during his greatest personal crisis. The king's attempts to minimize Camilla's behavior and suggest that media reports were exaggerated only deepened William's sense of betrayal. For the first time in his life, William questioned whether he wanted to inherit a crown that had cost him his marriage and family happiness. The public pressure intensified when several prominent figures spoke out in support of Catherine. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair, who had navigated his own challenges with royal relations, issued a statement praising Catherine's service and expressing hope for her swift return to public duties. Celebrity supporters, led by figures like David Beckham and Emma Thompson, used their platforms to criticize what they saw as bullying behavior within the royal family. Parliament members from both major parties began asking uncomfortable questions about the monarchy's internal dynamics. Labour MP Sarah Chen tabled a question asking the Prime Minister to comment on reports of discord within the royal family and its potential impact on public confidence in the institution. The political implications of the crisis began to extend far beyond palace walls. At Windsor Castle, Queen Elizabeth's former private secretary, Sir Robin Janvrin, was quietly consulted about historical precedents for managing such family crises. His advice was sobering. The monarchy could survive scandals, but not if they undermined public faith in the institution's basic decency and stability. The current situation, he warned, threatened both. The turning point came when Prince Harry, despite his own complicated relationship with the royal family, issued a rare public statement supporting Catherine. His message, posted on social media, praised his sister-in-law's dedication to service and expressed confidence in her character during a difficult period of reflection. The statement notably avoided mentioning Camilla or defending the institution, focusing solely on Catherine's personal qualities. The international media attention reached unprecedented levels when major American networks began covering the story as their lead international news item. CNN's royal correspondent called it the most significant crisis for the British monarchy since the death of Princess Diana, while major newspapers across Europe featured front-page coverage of what they termed the Queen's Smirk scandal. King Charles realized that decisive action was necessary to save his reign from irreparable damage. In an unprecedented move, he summoned both Camilla and William to Balmoral Castle for what palace sources described as crucial family discussions. The remote Scottish location provided privacy for conversations that would determine the monarchy's future direction. The three-day summit at Balmoral was intense and emotional. Charles was forced to confront the reality that his wife's behavior had created a crisis that threatened everything he had worked decades to achieve. William, supported by detailed accounts of staff testimony and media coverage, demanded not just an apology but fundamental changes in how family dynamics were managed. Camilla's position became increasingly untenable as evidence mounted of her inappropriate behavior and statements. Her attempts to characterize the situation as media manipulation fell apart when confronted with multiple consistent witness accounts. The Queen Consort, who had fought so hard for acceptance and respect, found her reputation in ruins. The breakthrough came when William finally received the call he had been desperately hoping for. Catherine, after watching the public support rally around her and seeing Camilla's behavior exposed, decided to return to London for a private family meeting. Her decision was influenced not just by William's plea, but by the realization that her departure had created space for exactly the kind of behavior she had originally opposed. Catherine's return to Kensington Palace was carefully orchestrated to avoid media attention. Her reunion with William was emotionally overwhelming for both of them, as months of suppressed feelings and fears finally found expression. The couple spent hours talking through their challenges, their different perspectives on royal life, and their hopes for their family's future. The children's joy at their mother's return provided the emotional foundation for rebuilding their family unit. Prince George's relief was particularly evident as he clung to Catherine during their reunion. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, while younger, clearly sensed the restoration of family stability and responded with increased happiness and security. The final resolution came in the form of unprecedented changes to royal family protocols. King Charles, faced with the choice between his wife's pride and his monarchy's survival, made difficult decisions about Camilla's future role. While she retained her title, her public duties were significantly reduced, and her influence over family matters was formally limited. Catherine's return to public duties was carefully managed, with her first appearance being a visit to a women's shelter where she had previously served as patron. The overwhelming public reception demonstrated that her popularity had, if anything, increased during her absence. The crowds that gathered to welcome her back showed that the public had clearly chosen sides in the royal family drama. William's relief at his family's restoration was evident in every public appearance. The strain that had marked his features during Catherine's absence gradually faded as their partnership resumed. Their first joint engagement after the crisis, a visit to a children's hospital, showed a couple stronger and more united than before their separation. The scandal's long-term impact fundamentally changed royal family dynamics. Camilla's influence waned significantly, while Catherine's position was strengthened by the public support she had received. The crisis had revealed the true feelings of staff, public, and family members, creating a new power structure within the monarchy. Palace staff members who had supported Catherine during her absence found their loyalty rewarded, while those who had aligned themselves with Camilla faced an uncertain future. Sarah Mitchell, the employee who had courageously spoken out, was quietly promoted and became a trusted confidant of Catherine's household staff. The media coverage gradually shifted from crisis reporting to celebration of Catherine's return and the family's apparent reconciliation. However, the underlying tensions and power dynamics that had created the original conflict remained complex and required ongoing attention to prevent future crises. As the royal family emerged from their greatest modern crisis, the lessons learned about loyalty, respect, and family unity became part of their institutional memory. Catherine's temporary departure had revealed both the fragility and the resilience of the monarchy, ultimately strengthening her position and clarifying the true sources of public support for the royal family. The smirk that had sparked outrage across the palace became a cautionary tale about the importance of compassion and respect within royal family relationships. The crisis had tested everyone involved, but ultimately reinforced the public's deep affection for Catherine and their expectations of dignity and kindness from all members of the royal family.